So, what brought you into the field of PHP?
What brought me in the field? It was working for the province actually as originally as a Java application developer, and there was an opportunity. I worked for one department that was basically kind of the IT group, and outside the IT group there was a department called Development and Technology at the time, and there was a group of developers over there. There's probably only about three or four. They're all fairly young folks. There's one guy that was kind of the top dog over there. But what I was impressed by them, there was a small group, but they maintained the government website, gov.pe.ca, and they were able to do a lot of work with a small group, and they were very efficient. And I was interested in PHP. I mean, working in Java, just curious about working in a different language in a different environment. And a job opportunity came up, which was at a higher level as well. So I applied for it, got the job. So I decided to move over there and work with those folks. So that's sort of what brought me into the world of PHP from Java application development.
Okay. How often would you use PHP in the workforce, and what on?
At the time, the biggest interest for me at the time when I first started, because I had experience working with the web, I understand HTML and have my background using Java and JSP. I sort of cut my teeth on the maintenance side of the website. So that particular group maintained the government website, but on the back end, a lot of the back end was maintained through a lot of small little admin applications. There was lots of different departments that had presence on that website. There was tourism was one of the clients. I worked for tourism. They'd have a lot of contests they would run. So I kind of got my built up my knowledge and learned on the job basically PHP through working on maintaining the website, small little projects, and then eventually started building my own applications.
Okay. How much background training did you have? Was it through books, or was it?
It was in-house. I mean, using the web. Google wasn't as big back then, but having a background when I was when I studied Holland College, we did basic web design, and then from that carrying it through Java, working in Java for probably for about 4 or 5 years doing Java web development. It was a fairly easy transition. I mean, there's syntax and there's certain concepts. I mean, PHP is different from Java, but the folks that worked there were very knowledgeable. There were some young guys that were really, really good at it, and then this guy Nick that kind of was the boss. He was a very bright guy, very intelligent, a lot of experience working in PHP, and so I learned from my colleagues, but also just kind of picking away at it, looking at code that was there. Maintaining an application is a great way to learn PHP, because you kind of look to see how did that person who built this or originally did the work. So I would study a lot of code to learn how to do it.
Okay. What kind of language do you think works well with PHP? Like for example, like JavaScript or what other?
They all seem to work. I mean, we used to use a lot of JavaScript. CSS, not really a language, but just different areas of web development were great. I mean, one of the guy that I worked with, Nick, who was really good at PHP, he was really strong in Perl, and PHP evolved from the Perl scripting language.
Okay.
It was designed. This guy Rasmus Radorf, I think the guy that created PHP, him and a couple other guys. I actually got to go to a couple of PHP conferences in Montreal where all the guys who created PHP would go, and most of these computer geeks would worship them like they were gods. It was funny, but what I liked about PHP was at that time when I worked in Java wasn't really open source. In order to run Java web applications, you had to buy, like IBM had an application server you had to pay a lot of money for. So PHP at that time had going for it. It was open source, the whole open source community, Apache project. You go to these conferences and everybody was like a lot of young folks there. They're all real cutting edge. They're pushing the envelope of it was really progressing as a language. I mean, I think they're up to PHP 5 or 6 now. So it was really at that time it was like PHP 3 when I was working it. So it was really evolving, and you can even see now how Zen got aboard. Zen is a company and they've got their framework and they started certifying people. At that point they were just starting to certify programmers in PHP. So it had more of an industry acceptance. Zen got really involved, and then they really started looking at building a framework and getting more object oriented. So I don't know, but competing, but starting to say, okay, well, there was always this big knock of Java and PHP developers, and who's better than, a competing kind of thing. So PHP is trying to be more, trying to become more object oriented. You know what I mean? And people said, well, even within the province, they'd be like, well, we really shouldn't use PHP to do these big applications because Java's more robust and it's just got more going for it. But folks that I coded with and people I knew were very accomplished PHP programmers could do the same type of application probably in less time and would be as effective and still have security, as strong a security as a Java application. So you'll see that there was a competition out in the world of web development, but also within a place like PEI's government, which was a small organization. And to this day, they still have a group of guys that do PHP and there's a group that do Java still to this day, because there's a place for both, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. How long have you been in the field of IT?
I've been in the field of IT for 13, almost 14 years. So I was fortunate enough, graduated from Holland College, started with the province, and at that time most of the applications were built in a thing called PowerBuilder, which is a client server similar to a Visual Basic. And I was my first day of OJT, they had just purchased a web platform. There was 2 other guys that were doing web development, and I was offered the opportunity to, they said, well, do you want to go work on PowerBuilder? Or do you want to, we just kind of decided to go this Java route. I didn't have a lot of experience with Java. We did 2 days of building an applet, a Java applet, at the college. Of course, we did JavaScript, which is more or less completely different. But I mean, for me, it was like an opportunity. I said, well, this is new. I want to go with these guys because I think there could be opportunity. And there was one other lady that went on OJT with me at the time. She went PowerBuilder, and there was a lot of PowerBuilder programmers working with the province. So I thought, maybe if I get in here and I've got 3 months and I can make some headway, maybe they'll keep me around. And the lady, they eventually did let her go. I think she worked for a few months after OJT, but they just were so heavy on programmers for PowerBuilder that she didn't have, there was an opportunity. But the fact that I stayed got in the door using Java, which was something I didn't really know much about, but kind of took the bull by the horns. It kind of got my foot in the door. But it allowed me, and then once I had my foot in the door, PHP, other opportunities were, kind of sort of, I like working in Java, I like PHP, maybe I'll go over here and like I said, the last few years I did a lot of data analysis work and stuff, so there was opportunity to move around, but a lot of them have common traits and things that you learn along the way, but you're always going to be learning new stuff. That's the thing, and even when you get somewhere and somebody asks you to try something you're not familiar with, it could be a good opportunity for you, what I mean? So.
Perfect. Okay, what would be the most complicated program that you would have created with PHP, whether it was in industry or personal or?
Probably, like I said, when I first started, because I had to learn, I did a lot of maintenance work, which is a great way to learn. And probably the application that I was only there a couple of years, I built an inventory application for Access PEI. For keeping track of all their license plates, their stickers and stuff that they use for registration, all little things like that. So that was probably the most complicated. I worked it on predominantly by myself, but of course I consulted with my colleagues with any ideas I had to approach this and that. I found the biggest challenge, regardless of PHP or Java, is that upfront planning of figuring out what the client wants, how is it supposed to work, and undoubtedly it's hard to get the real story out of it, and then if trying to anticipate functionality that they may want that they may not want now, but they're going to want. And I remember that application, I kind of built it was out working, and then they came back, we want to change this, we want to add this to it, and it's difficult as a developer. So sometimes it's like, oh, that's an easy fix, or I got to go back and change my database. I got to do a major rewrite of the original to add that functionality. Yeah. So I had a few situations like that, but mostly inventory system. I did a system for basically kind of property tax, keeping track of who owns parcels of land on PEI, things like that. It was kind of an admin side to the. On the Gov website, there's a whole component on that, on what's called MapCo. You go out and look at different parcels of land and geographical type stuff, but there was an inside, and I worked on the inside of that. I worked on an application for immigrant investors, and that was done by a developer before me. I took it over and made some changes, and he had done it completely in his own kind of framework, object-oriented framework. It was very cumbersome, and what he had done, it was like, I remember it was one of those nightmare stories, and I talk about it in class where you know, if somebody's built an application the way they think it should be, and then they leave, and you got to maintain it, it's gonna be a real nightmare. To the point where some of them are like, I've seen where guys have left, and somebody will say, you know, I'm just gonna have to rewrite the whole application because, you know, it's just yeah, no, and it's just not really. You know, we used to be left to our own devices because we had a small group and we had a lot of work to do. So you kind of went off on your own. I like to consult with some of the senior guys because of their knowledge. But sometimes you get guys come in and they go off in the corner and they do all this work on their own, and it would get out there and it would work. But sometimes they'd leave and you'd look and say, well, geez, that's not really built very well, and that's got to be fixed there, and it causes problems down the road. So go back to frameworks and stuff, and everybody being on the comp page. There are benefits to them, some of that stuff. But PHP was great. I mean, you know, it's more of like a rapid application development. I found in Java it can take you longer to get set, and Struts is like that. It can take you longer to get set up, and when you learn a new framework, it takes you a while to get used to it.
Yeah.
And PHP can be a little faster, but sometimes, you know, if you look at PHP now, they're evolving more into frameworks, and they're seeing the benefits of that whole idea. So you know, there's different ways to approach it and stuff like that. But it's you know, it was interesting work to do, and like I say, at that time the group we had was small, but we were able to crank out applications pretty fast. So
okay, two more questions.
Yeah.
How do you think PHP sizes up to other programming languages such as Java, since you've worked in it too?
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I've seen it all depends on the person, the coder themselves. Really, it's the language. You know, especially now with advances in PHP, with the different versions and the frameworks. I mean, I've seen some amazing things done by PHP programmers, you know what I mean? Same thing with Java programmers. I think in terms of an organization, it's a little easier. The learning curve isn't as steep as it would be with Java, because I've seen folks, because I have folks that I work with at the province that do PHP, and there was one point they did a reorganization in IT and PE, in the PEI government. They said they were going to get rid of PHP. They're going to go straight Java. But they just had a hard time doing it. They had so many applications done in PHP, and it took so long to build them in Java that they just stuck with the PHP, because certain situations it just worked. You know, it's, you know, some people not have a knock on PHP, and I haven't worked in it in a while, so I'm assuming they've made a lot of advances. But some of the security wasn't as good, and it wasn't as robust for certain really complex applications. But I mean, for most of the stuff we were doing, like the smaller applications, it worked fine. So, you know, Java is probably more powerful in certain ways, but I think PHP has grown in leaps and bounds. And like I say, people talk PHP now. They talk about object-oriented programming in PHP as well. So those types of, if you have that type of functionality, then, you know, it can sort of hold its own with other languages. Yeah. I used to work with one called Cold Fusion that they taught at Holland College. That was the web platform, Cold Fusion, that was bundled with, used to be Macromedia. You guys Macromedia. Flash used to be owned, and Shockwave were owned by Macromedia. Yeah. They had an ID called Dreamweaver. People used to do a lot of web development with Dreamweaver, and Cold Fusion was the application, was the sort of the programming language for Macromedia. I did some stuff on that. That was kind of PHP-esque, but PHP just survived because Macromedia, you had to buy the stuff, the server you had to pay for. PHP was pretty well free, right? So XAMPP, download it, boom, you got yourself an environment, you're building applications, right? So they had that on their side. But you know, but now you're seeing Java is more free. So they've come full circle with Java. You had to pay a lot of money to use it. Now Oracle bought it. You've got NetBeans, it's basically free. You've got Glassfish server. You've got a few other bigger servers that cost money, like JBoss, but Tomcat's a free server. So now it is more of a dogfight because they're more on a level playing field in both ways. So Java's costs less money. PHP can do object-oriented programming, so now there's this real battle that goes on, right? So it makes things interesting.
Okay. And last question, what would be the average income for a PHP programmer, or any type of programmer?
Well, I know that within government, everybody, I mean, you wouldn't typically get paid anymore if you were doing Java versus PHP. There's guys I work with that were like let's say a level 17, a senior programmer with the province would probably make about 66 grand a year, 68 grand a year. Okay. And there was guys that were senior programmers that did PHP and guys that did Java.
Yeah.
so there was no difference.
Okay.
In the private sector, I think it just comes down to what your capabilities are.
Yeah.
You know, how good you are at what you do, whatever language.
Yeah.
So if you're a great PHP programmer and you have clients that want, you know, a very complex application, you can build it in PHP, then you're probably going to make as much money. You know, it's there's a lot more people out there doing it that have knowledge of it, and it goes back to that idea of the days when it was free. Like you can download XAMPP, so you can have a lot of people that are kind of PHP programmers that are more, they may not be the greatest ones. They're doing a few web pages, little applications, so that can kind of bring the level of you know, if you're building small little applications, there's about 100 people out there doing it, then you're not going to make a lot of money doing it. But if you're really good at it, you know, in anything, you're going to get paid more than the average person. So,
just a follow-up question on the one of the most complicated programs that you've created.
Yeah.
Is there is that like available to the public to view, or
no? These were probably at this point they would be like admin type stuff that. Both of them were admin things that the government, proprietary to government, they're not public facing. Yeah.
Is there anywhere we can see some of the work that you may have done?
Well, I mean, I just worked on the government website. I mean, some of that work, like the gov.pe.ca, but most of the applications that I've done were more or less like if you go to get your license renewed, the application they use at the Access PEI is one that I worked on. So most of them were, because I work for government, they were more or less for government. They weren't. I didn't do a lot of private sector work, so there wouldn't be anything, an application that a person would use on the internet that I would have built. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think that's all.
Say that court booking system.